As a reminder, we're doing Swift News monthly now. It'll be the first weekday of every month. You can check out the links to everything you see in this show in the GitHub repo. The link to the repo will be in the description. And as a quick note, I started creating bundles for my courses. So if you're interested in those topics, you can get multiple courses at the same time for a pretty decent discount. All right, let's throw up the rundown and get into the show. To kick things off, we have the latest project from Dave Verwer, who runs iOS Dev Weekly. Very popular newsletter. Check that out if you're not signed up for that. But here we are, iOS Dev Jobs. Another thing you can sign up for to get notifications. It's also a Mac app and an iPhone app. Again, I know I'm plugging this, but this is not sponsored or anything like that. I just thought it's a cool tool for those that are looking for a job. And I know much of my audience is out there trying to get that first iOS developer job. So here's a nice way to get notified of a bunch of new jobs that have been listed, right? You can see iOS engineer at Epic. There's Notion, I believe, is on here as well. There was Amazon. Yep, there's Notion. So all kinds of different iOS developer jobs. If you're in the market, definitely a great tool for you to check out. Next up, we have creating slick color palette APIs from Joe Fabisevich. Now, he talks about writing maintainable code and building maintainable systems that you can transfer from project to project. And color palettes are a perfect thing that, once you set up once, it is nice to take from project to project. Now, of course, the colors are going to be different, but we're talking about the structure that is set up in this article that I think is very handy. So, of course, I won't go through the whole article. Definitely check it out, but I'll give you the highlights. So essentially, we're creating a new asset catalog for color palettes. And then down here, you see a whole bunch of different colors for light and dark mode. And on the left, it's probably too small to see on the video, but definitely check it out. All of these colors are named generic names, right? Background alt, background main, primary, quaternary, secondary, tertiary, text alt, text primary. So the reason you name them generic names is because, like I said, the colors, are going to change from app to app, but they can always be named the same, right? Because it's always like that design system, right? You're always going to have in my apps, I usually have like a brand primary, brand secondary, that kind of thing. And again, if you name them generically, you can transfer them around because as we scroll down, you can see we're going to be getting into the code and how you access them. Well, if the names are all still like background alt, text primary, whatever color you change up here, in your color palette, it's relevant. It's all going to map, to the same thing. So all you have to do in a new project is change these colors here in the asset catalog, and everything is set up good to go in your code, and you can access them very nicely and easily, as he shows down here at the bottom. Keep scrolling. Yeah, here it is, where you put them in the environment in SwiftUI, right? You have your color palette environment value, and then you just palette.primary text or palette.background main or whatever. And again, the idea here is to have a system that you can transfer from project to project, where all you got to do, open up your asset catalog, change these colors around, and then you access them the same way you did in all the other projects. So again, I like the idea of this reusable system that you can transfer from project to project. Moving on, we have confirmation dialogues in SwiftUI by Majid here, and I've been using these a lot in my latest projects. I'll show you that in a second. But here's the code. You can check out the article for that. What are they though? Here's the image, right? This little action sheet at the bottom. I like these a lot better than, showing a system pop-up. Like when you're deleting an object in your app and you want to say, are you sure you want to delete this? Rather than showing like the system alert that takes over the whole screen, I like this little slide up at the bottom. But I especially like it on the iPad, as you see here, where the confirmation dialog appears as a popover, and it just fits nicely in that iPad environment. In the screenshot you're seeing, I used to have like the typical system alert pop up that said, are you sure, hit yes or cancel, but then I switched to the confirmation dialog, and I like this look a lot better, and I'll be using these confirmation dialogs all throughout my app rather than system alerts, when it applies. So I definitely wanted to share this article by Majid showing you how to use them in your app. Next up, we have an article from Federico of 5 Stars blog, Every SwiftUI Environment Value Explained. Now, I recently did a video basically introducing the concept of environment values, and I showed a couple different examples using dynamic type and dark mode, light mode. And the point of that video was just to introduce the topic. Well, again, Federico goes way deeper, every environment value explained. So what I recommend, if you're not familiar with environment values, watch my video to get the introduction into like what they are. And then when you're ready to do the deep dive into each, single environment value and what it is and how to use it, Federico's got this great blog post for you. And I appreciate that he grouped them, right? Generic component values. You'll scroll down here, like display values. Like I said, we use dynamic type size in my video, but they're grouped nicely with examples and explanations on how to use them, view specific values, that kind of stuff. So again, it's a very long, in-depth article that goes through every single environment value. I know I'm scrolling kind of fast, but the point is to just point you in this direction so you can check it out for yourself. So like I said, check out my video for the introduction and like what they are and like how to use them. And then the deep dive, this is a great resource for all the environment values. The next topic I want to discuss is near and dear to our hearts, and that is force unwrapping. I originally had this image in the LOL section, but I thought it was a good intro to the force unwrapping section. You can read the meme, pretty funny. But the discussion that I wanted to share was a tweet from Matt here. It says, I don't understand why force unwrapping has such a negative connotations in Swift. It's almost always demands less thought from the reader than an if, let, no, guard, whatever, all the different ways to unwrap optionals. It's just a concise preconditioned statement. And there's a great discussion all in the replies. So I highly recommend you check out this thread and read through the discussion. I wanted to share this because especially among developers just learning, they may hear like never ever force unwrap, that force unwrap is always bad. And that is a very pervasive meme, I guess, throughout the iOS developer community. And I will say that like 95% of the time force unwrapping is bad, but anytime you hear an absolute, like never, ever, ever, there's probably always exceptions. So I guess I wanted to share this and share this discussion in the thread for those that may be subscribing to that never force unwrap. That's always bad because somebody told me that when I was learning. And my take on it is unnecessary force unwrapping in that certain situations where, in my opinion, it's fine to force unwrap. If you just force unwrap everything all willy-nilly, it does clutter up your code with all the if, lets, guard, and all the, just following that control flow makes it harder to read than a simple, force unwrap. Now, again, I'm not saying force unwrap everything. Of course not. Let me repeat myself. Force unwrapping is a bad idea probably 95% of the time. So you should probably default to unwrapping them. But I wanted to share this great discussion in this Twitter thread to maybe get you away from that absolutist state of mind of never ever force unwrap. I don't know why. I just heard that's a rule, so I'm never force unwrapping. Think about it. There are certainly times where it's better to force unwrap. And again, this thread is a great discussion on that topic. And a great segue from that topic is this article from Antoine Vanderlee, Unwrap or Throw, Exploring Solutions in Swift. And even though we were just talking about unwrapping optionals and all that stuff, really the point I liked about this article was exploring solutions in Swift. And we'll get to more of that in a second. But the story here is Antoine was exploring different ways to unwrap or throw, like I said, and he was exploring this thread, SE0217, the unwrap or die operator that ultimately got rejected. But going through that thread, and you can click on this article and dig into that if you want, he got to see many different approaches, many different methods to solve this problem. And that's kind of what he's talking about, exploring different solutions in Swift. So the example he talks about is, unwrapping an optional and throwing an error in the nil case and how you can do that, right? So see, exploring solutions for throwing an error on nil, right? You can use a closure, and he gives the example there. By the way, I'm going fast because this is not about how to do this, right? You can read the article for that. The point I'm talking about is how you explore these solutions, right? You can either use a method, use a custom nil coalescing operator, which is ultimately what he did. But this is a controversial solution. And another reason why I wanted to talk about this is there are many different ways to do things in programming. And you may hear, again, back to the never force unwrap thing, you may hear all these rules. But remember, your code base, your product, your problem, your team, that is all unique to you. So just because someone's general solution, may tell you not to do this, it actually may work for you. So that's what he's talking about with this custom nil coalescing operator, right? Many people don't like these custom operators in Swift. There's like a high learning curve. For example, here's the operator. I'll show it to you in code down here, right? You see it here. Like imagine if you're new to a code base and you're just used to Swift and then you see this operator. You're like, what the hell is that? Like, I don't know what that is, right? It's a high learning curve. So that's why people may not like them. But like Antoine says, he prefers it. He likes the compact and the readability of it. But the caveat here, it's up to you to decide whether you like operators or not in this case. To share you my opinion, he loves using them. Yet, I also have to agree with my colleagues before implementing this into our projects. Again, if your team agrees on a certain style, a certain method of doing things, great, go for it, as long as everybody's on board and thinks that's the best solution for you and your code base. So that was a little mini rant. Again, the main lesson of this article and why I wanted to share it, and I highly recommend reading it to read through the examples, is what he says in the conclusion, right? Exploring various different solutions and seeing other way people approach things and why they like that solution or why they don't like that solution. Hearing all that, like you said, makes you a better engineer, and you'll find solutions written by others will inspire you to improve your code, right? Even if you don't end up using those other solutions, you still learned a lot. And like you said, it can inspire you to come up with your own solution. So exploring various different options is a great idea in Swift. Since we're pretty much just professional Googlers, like that's really all we do all day, I wanted to share this thread from Chris here, right? If you use it right, Google is the most powerful tool in the world. But the truth is, most people suck at it. Improving your Googling skills as a developer will be very beneficial to you in your day-to-day job. So here's 8 Googling tips that you probably don't know. I'll just go through a couple of them. So if you put the search term in quotation marks, it will give you exactly that, right? Not just like partial or, fuzzy search results, if you will. Right? Dashes will exclude a term, right? If you're searching for dolphins and you want the animal, you don't want the Dolphins football team, like he says here, you can do dash football to exclude that. And that's great because sometimes programming terms are also like real life terms and you get mixed up search results. So that's a way to eliminate certain words. You can use a tilde if you want, synonyms for that word. He uses classes, lessons, coaching. Again, I'm not going to go through all these. There's a whole bunch of great Googling tips that will help you in your day-to-day because like I said, that's what we spend most of our day doing. Moving on, we have a great blog post from Amro here. It says, software engineering isn't magic. And I have this conversation a lot when I'm teaching people how to code, because oftentimes people that are just learning, they may ask somebody more experienced or more senior than them a question, and the more experienced engineer comes back and just says, bam, here's the answer. Or at least they point you in the right direction, right? Because every problem, is unique for the most part. And the junior person or the person just learning how to code thinks it's like magic. Wow, this person's so smart. They know everything. I will never be that smart. And what they don't realize, and I say this all the time, is the reason that more experienced engineer knows that is because, one, they've either done it 1,000 times. It's something like a common table view issue or something, or it is a relatively unique problem, but they've encountered that problem or a similar problem before, and they banged their head against that problem for weeks, and then they finally solved it, right? And then now they know that. They're never going to forget that. So that's why it seems like they know it, is because they've gone through the struggle, right? And then learned it. I'll give you a quick example of something I just did 2 days ago. So I was having issues in my latest app with core data, drag and drop, and getting SwiftUI updates to trigger, that kind of combination, kind of a niche problem to have. Well, I was banging my head against that problem for 2 straight days. I was dejected. I hated life at the moment. That feeling, right? Where you're just so frustrated, right? You're hitting that roadblock, banging your head against the wall. And then finally I got through it. And to be fair to myself, I'm not a core data pro. I'm just kind of really getting into the weeds of core data. But anyway, I finally solved that problem. But because I went through that emotion of banging my head against the wall, hating life, being so dejected, and then I finally got through it. Now if someone asks me a core data drag and drop type question and how to handle that, I'm going to kind of know the answer or point them in the right direction really quickly. And that person's going to think I'm a genius. And no, I'm not a genius. I couldn't figure the problem out for 2 straight days, so that's why I know it. But that is why software engineering isn't magic. 99% of the time, if a more experienced engineer knows an answer quickly to what is seemingly tough problem, they've either done it 1,000 times or they've gone through the struggle to learn it. And going through that struggle is really how we learn. And I say this all the time. Learn to embrace that struggle, because again, that's where if there's any magic, right, the magic of learning happens in that struggle. But yeah, software engineering isn't magic. We've just all gone through hell to get here. Moving on to AR Corner, to kick things off, I want to start off with this thread from Andrew Hart about how Apple has been building in public with their AR. And we've been mentioning this, throughout previous editions of Swift News, with things like app clips. Many people aren't using app clips in their app, but to me, that is a very clear AR feature, right? When you have glasses looking at app clips, that's what those are for, not necessarily on the phone. But here's more examples of that, right? SwiftUI is a way to describe the UI without writing layout code, which magically constructs your UI across any form factor. That could reduce the need for building a brand new interface for AR. Swift-only frameworks are super lightweight. They kind of shifted to RealityKit, as he says, replacing ARKit, and that's a AR-first developer API. Apple Silicon, which, powers small devices. Again, app clips, like I mentioned. If you're really paying attention, you can see Apple's AR plan slowly taking shape over time. And I thought that was an interesting thread to share. But now let's get on to the acid trip that is AR. Voxelize AR. So basically turn your real world into Minecraft, I guess. We'll see it coming up here. Yeah, you can just pixelate everything. I'll fast forward a little bit. Yeah. You can see everything get pixelated around you if you're into that sort of stuff. Again, I think ARKit is like a giant acid trip. You see, you just put a lake in your room, I don't know, with koi fish in it, whatever. All right. Again, it's going to be really, really trippy. Last episode, I didn't include any LOLs, and I got a few comments on that, so here you go. You asked for it. Got a bunch of them for you. Me, when I'm coding in front of someone, yeah, pretty much, right? We've all been there. I'd say I can't type my name if I'm trying to like type in front of someone. I hate people watching me like code. Hate it. And that's usually how it ends up. Next up, AirPod Man. Again, this just made me chuckle, right? I don't know. That was funny. I'll go through these pretty quickly. Ed Sanchez says, what do you think of this quick little design I made? Engineer, we've all been here, right? Talking designer, engineer. Nice. But what if the user is offline, has accessibility type on, is in landscape, is Russian, but is in Brazil, has a broken thumb, holding a martini in one hand while running from wolves? Of course, it gets crazy. But the point is, oftentimes you get a nice, perfect design that doesn't handle any of the edge cases. And it's up to you as the engineer to figure that out. So it's as funny as this tweet was, it's also like disheartening. Like, that's a rough part of being an engineer there, is dealing with all that stuff. All right, next up, we have another tweet here with a little bit of wisdom in it, right? The junior says, let's use a for loop. The senior says, let's use an array of function pointers where we substitute a compute, whatever, some crazy, convoluted, very clever answer. Staff engineer says, let's just use a for loop. And then the principal, here's the punchline, right? Have you considered eliminating this feature? And oftentimes people don't consider, they're so caught up in how to solve the problem, they don't think big picture enough to be like, why do we even have this problem? Do we even need this? Like that kind of thought. And down here, Nico agrees, right? I'm all for removing features. Companies and developers should do that more often. And I agree. And it's kind of funny, right? Our job is to write code, but I think we've all been there. One of the most satisfying parts of our job is deleting code, ironically enough. So anyway, something to think about. Next up, we got, the old, if you've dealt with a lot of, REST APIs, you'll see this, right? Where the server returns a status 200, which usually means everything's okay. And then within that message, you get the error, rather than just passing you back the bad status code. I know many of you have felt that before, so that one gave me a good laugh. Next up, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm busy that day. And it's funny how just one call can ruin your day, right? Because maybe you have lunch before the call and you spend a little bit of time prepping for the call. You're like, well, I got to prep for this call, so I can't really get into my engineering work. And then, maybe the call goes from 2 till 3:30 and you're like, well, now it's almost 4. Might as well not start something. The day's almost over. And that one call at like 2 p.m. completely ruins your day. So be careful as an engineer on accepting these meetings. I understand you may have no choice, but try to push back and schedule it for a time that's not right in the middle of your day, because it basically just ruins your whole day. But yeah, that one made me sad because it's so true. And then finally, adding more people to a project, the good old classical mythical man month, right? What's the estimate? A month. What if I add one more engineer? It'll be 2 months. Confused look. If we add a PM, trust me, you don't want to know. And yet, more often than not, throwing more people at the problem actually slows it down rather than speeds it up. But anyway, that wraps up this episode of Swift News. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next month.